The strategic Bitcoin reserve in the US is currently surprising everyone because most people don't expect the US to buy Bitcoin, but it's actually way more bullish than most people think. And I'm telling you, the US is going to buy Bitcoin. And now we're going to dive into all the details and specifics that have come to light about why the US is going to buy Bitcoin. Even though this executive order only talks about a transformation of the Bitcoin that's already in the US reserves for now, most people don't really understand what's going on here, and we need to take a close look at it. Also, we're now seeing a statement from the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, here in the US regarding the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And we see that Bitcoin FOMO, the reserve FOMO strategy, is now actually breaking out in other countries, for example, in China. And with that, let's jump right in. We also want to gather some feedback and so on today, just to put everything into perspective, because it was definitely a pretty intense event. And now, with a bit of distance, we can put everything into perspective much better. We also saw that the Bitcoin market initially sold off because people were very disappointed. Now it's going up a bit because people might be thinking, okay, maybe it's not that bearish after all. But while we're recording this video, the Bitcoin price is already dropping again, and Bitcoin is selling off once more. At the end of the video, we also want to take a look at the reasons why, despite the strategic Bitcoin reserve, the price might still stagnate a bit in the short term, but long term, this is super bullish. I'm going to tell you why the US is very likely going to buy Bitcoin in the future. But first, let's take a look at China. Here we can actually see that the Chinese media are reporting on this as well. It's just come in that news about the US strategic Bitcoin reserve is being reported in Chinese media. Game theory is in full swing, and that's exactly the thing that happens. If the US does this, then other nations, other big media houses, and so on, they all jump on it. I've already seen it on ARD and other places. The news is out there. Hey, the US now has a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and this is definitely something very, very big that's happening right now. Here, Senator Cynthia Lummis is also saying that this is the most Bitcoin and digital asset-friendly administration in history. So she's referring to the Trump administration, saying that the Trump administration is very Bitcoin-friendly, and that they're really going all in on Bitcoin. We've never seen anything like this in US history, and we've never seen anything like this in the history of humanity, where a major country like the US has been so positively inclined towards Bitcoin. Here, Robert Kiyosaki also says here, President Trump signed strategic Bitcoin reserve. Sellers are losers. Will buy more Bitcoin. So he is now accumulating even more Bitcoin because Robert Kiyosaki has understood that this is something very, very big, and whoever sells Bitcoin now could end up looking very, very stupid. Of course, there are now a few sellers who somehow took advantage of the sell the news event. He didn't even sell Bitcoin. There was a sell the news event and so on. But in the long term, this could really backfire if you sell your Bitcoin now. Feel free to drop a comment about what you were doing when Donald Trump signed the executive order. So I was out hiking at that moment, but what about you? I don't know. Drop a comment and let me know what you were up to. Then we move on. We have more exciting insights here. Here, British Hodl writes on June 15, 2023 has changed the world for Bitcoin. Everything else hinges on this date. Do you understand how the world works? Back then, the Bitcoin spot ETFs were applied for, and that was basically the big catalyst. Not approved yet, but they were in the application process. They would then be in January, approved in 2024, which means we really had it in June. 2023, the kickstart of global, institutional, and nation-state adoption with the Bitcoin ETFs. Then they would be approved, and now we see the strategic Bitcoin reserve, and here is also a very good summary from Dylan LeClaire, who says here that Trump will never recognize Bitcoin. He will not appear at Bitcoin 2025. So here in Nashville, that was all said, but none of it has come to pass. Then it was said that he wouldn't announce a strategic Bitcoin reserve, but he did. He wouldn't free Ross Ulbricht, but he did that too. The strategic Bitcoin reserve won't be Bitcoin, but rather a US-based cryptocurrency. That turned out to be false. It was Bitcoin after all. They won't be buying any new Bitcoin for the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And this is interesting. We need to take a closer look at what's coming up. Here he also says that this isn't true, and that's interesting because we need to take a closer look at this. A lot of people assume that we're just seeing a conversion because it clearly states that there will be a conversion of the Bitcoin that are currently held in the US. So we need to check how much Bitcoin is actually out there. But one thing a lot of people have forgotten is the clause that if you make this budget neutral, then you can actually accumulate Bitcoin. And now we have also seen that there was some disappointment at the beginning, and now more and more people are posting here about what budget neutral accumulation can look like. And folks, believe me, there are many, many more options than most people think. And definitely, I wouldn't say 100%, but there is a very, very high probability that something will happen here. Let's say, and then the USA will also buy Bitcoin. And we really need to take a close look at this. Because right now, it's probably the most interesting thing that has the entire Bitcoin market buzzing. How the US can buy Bitcoin and do it all in a budget neutral way. Here, Michael Saylor is already writing that he has a few budget neutral strategies for acquiring Bitcoin. Samson Ma chimes in right below, talking about Bitcoin bonds. So, the Bitcoin bonds would be one way to make this. budget neutral, but there are actually a lot more options out there. There are a few options that, to be honest, are not particularly promising. E.G. If you could collect taxes in Bitcoin, it would be budget neutral. You wouldn't be spending any new tax money or anything like that, and you could use that to buy Bitcoin. That would actually be permissible, but honestly, it probably doesn't make much sense. I can't imagine the US collecting taxes in Bitcoin right now, especially since, like I said, there are Bitcoin bonds. Then there's, for example, the possibility that they could collaborate with miners, essentially scooping up the miner rewards directly. That option exists. Then there's the story with David Bailey also posted this, and I need to show you guys briefly. He shared 3 options. Here he says that in the Exchange Stabilization Fund, there are currently 39 billion US dollars, which could be used to buy Bitcoin, and that would also be budget neutral. And here's another really important thing. Dennis Porter mentioned this a while back. He talked about the possibility of using the Exchange Stabilization Fund to allow other countries to pay back loans in Bitcoin. This means the US would give loans to other countries, for example, to Germany, to Europe, but with the condition, for example, if they were to make a loan with Germany or something like that, that the loan could only be repaid in Bitcoin, and that way, they could also accumulate Bitcoin in a budget neutral manner. This is a method that a lot of people don't even think about, but I find it really, really interesting. So, first, the capital from the Exchange Stabilization Fund, and second, through the lending that would be paid back in Bitcoin, you could also accumulate Bitcoin, and all of this would actually be budget neutral. So, let's see what else is out there. The US has 160 billion in special drawing rights, which theoretically could be used. But I don't think that's going to happen. I see it as unrealistic. However, there are also 800 billion in gold certificates that could be revalued. If you look at Fort Knox, the gold ounces there are currently valued at around $40 each. They could be revalued, and from that, new capital could be created. Then, they could leverage that gold and use the newly created credit money to buy Bitcoin again. So, on one hand, we have the gold ounces that could theoretically be revalued. Additionally, we have the gold certificates that could be sold, or we also have the gold bars that could be sold. So we could sell the physical gold, we could sell the gold certificates, or we could have the physical gold revalued and use it to realize unrealized profits, and then use it to invest in Bitcoin with leverage. With credit leverage. There's also the option to handle this through tariffs, meaning that the revenue from tariffs could be invested in Bitcoin. This has been suggested before, especially for the Southern Wealth Fund, where it said that they want to finance it through tariff revenues. You could also envision something like that for the stockpile. So, we have so many different options now, and Michael Saylor also says he has even more possibilities, which means there will probably be several other options coming up in the near future. I mean, one possibility could be selling certain other things that are in the US Strategic Reserve. Who knows if it's steel or, I don't know, whatever else they have in their reserve, wood, or whatever else is in there. They could sell certain things and then pump that into Bitcoin. I mean, what would also be interesting would actually be the Bitcoin bonds, what Samsung now has already pitched here, which somehow would never have been introduced here in El Salvador either. But if Donald Trump is saying he wants to make the US the crypto capital, I mean, then Bitcoin bonds would be totally insane. So Bitcoin bonds would be absolutely amazing. I also believe that this would really take the US to the next level because then you would essentially be shifting the MicroStrategy playbook to the U.S. And then some really, really interesting background events happened. Here you can actually see Donald Trump, and here you see David Sachs. Who else do we have here? Here you can see a few other people that I don't know or can't recognize, but you can also see Elon Musk, and that was the moment when the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve was signed. And here it says, Elon didn't mention anything about the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, but he was present when President Trump signed the executive order. And this is what the Bitcoin therapist writes. And I find that really, really interesting because Elon Musk usually comments on everything. And I mentioned this a while back. Why isn't Elon Musk commenting on the whole Bitcoin Strategic Reserve situation? So, Elon Musk, no matter what it is, whether it's the IRS, USAID, Fort Knox, or the Federal Reserve, he really comments on everything. I mean, all kinds of stuff. He shares his opinions, saying this is good, that's bad, we need to audit it, we don't need to audit it, we need to shut it down, we need to do something about it. Except for his comments on the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, he hasn't made any comments at all, neither in the past nor now. And he was also present, which means he must have seen all of this. You can't really say, okay, maybe he just didn't notice for something like that. And now the speculation starts, okay, what's going on with Elon Musk? Why is he being so reserved here? So feel free to drop your thoughts on what's going on here. So it seems like there's still some kind of conflict with Bitcoin going on. Something seems to be blocking him. That's the feeling I get. And now let's actually take a look at the US Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, and what he has to say about the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve.
So the first thing to do is to stop the selling. So we are going to, after the victims are paid and all of that, any seized assets will go into this reserve, and then we'll see what the way forward is for more acquisitions for the reserves.
So he clearly says we need to stop selling Bitcoin. That was the thing, that the marshals still sell Bitcoin here. So there are different sources. Some say they sold Bitcoin, some say they don't. He says we have to stop all the selling. We have to give the victims back their Bitcoin. I think at Bitfinex it's still Bitcoin or something like that. That means that if you pay it back, like Scott Bosson, then all that's left is something like. We don't know exactly how much Bitcoin the USA currently has because the marshals seem to have lost control here. It's pretty wild that they're losing control over their Bitcoin holdings. Then he says in any case, the confiscated assets will be handed over in Bitcoin, so they will be handed over to the stockpile, and now comes the important part, Scott Bazins also says here. After that we will look at how we can make more purchases here. So, from what I'm hearing, feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments on how you interpret this, but to me, it clearly means they want to make more purchases. They just need to evaluate exactly how they're going to do that. So, are they using the gold certificates, the special drawing rights, the exchange stabilization fund, or what options are they using here? So, that's going to be evaluated. From what I understand right now, it's pretty clear that Bitcoin is definitely going to be bought. On the US side, we just need to figure out what the best options are, and that will probably become clear in the next few months. We also have Donald Trump's speech coming up later at the crypto summit and so on. Maybe we'll also get some new details. We really need to keep an eye on this. A lot of people are wondering what's going on with the Bitcoin price. Here's a really interesting take from Florian Kassler. Let me read this to you real quick because he really hit the nail on the head. It's crazy when we realize how far Bitcoin has come in a short period of time. Today, there's a discussion at the White House about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, but it's also crazy that large parts of the Bitcoin community still refuse to see that Bitcoin is basically just a call option on the Nasdaq right now. When global liquidity rises, the Nasdaq goes up and Bitcoin outperforms. Simple as that. When global liquidity drops, the Nasdaq falls and Bitcoin underperforms. Just like that, no conspiracy, no mispricing of Bitcoin, just the way markets work. From April onwards, we should therefore see rising prices again. What happens until then is a black hole. Maybe another mini crash is quite possible. Strategic reserve or not, I found that to be a really interesting assessment. Feel free to drop your opinions about it in the comments below. I'm signing off, folks, and if you're super bullish on Bitcoin, I'll drop a link below to 21 Bitcoin, where you can easily, safely, and simply buy Bitcoin. Here, with the code Bitcoin Hotel, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. It's suitable for beginners, advanced users, and everyone in between. It's a great platform. I absolutely recommend it. I use it myself, folks. Until then, peace out.